Hello everyone, I'm Drachona. I just had a real quick thought on the whole Jontron versus Destiny thing. Now, I have not watched the entire debate, if you really want to call it that, but this is actually more of a direct response to a video that Armoured Skeptic made about the debate. I just wanted to talk about centrism, because Skeptic was talking about centrism, and he was talking about Chris Reagan, he was talking about Jontron, and I wanted to throw my 2 cents out there about centrism, because I generally consider myself a centrist, but I felt like this idea was coming across that centrism means being in the middle all the time, and I completely disagree with that. I don't think that being a centrist means that you're always in the middle, that between two extremes, you're always pretty much in the middle. I think that being a centrist generally means that sometimes you have a view that's a bit more liberal when you're talking about politics, and sometimes you have a view that's a little bit more conservative. You know, you might lean to one side or the other, but you're generally standing in the middle. It balances out. That doesn't mean that there aren't issues where you do have a more centrist, more compromising position, but there are certain things, like you might be a little bit more liberal. Like, here's a good example. For me, I believe that abortion should be legal. I'm not going to say I'm pro-abortion, because nobody is pro-abortion, but I believe that women should have the choice to do that. To me, it's a given. There's no reason why women should not have that choice. Well, that is a more liberal position. That's not really centrist. That's not really in the middle, because the opposition, in my opinion, the position is completely ridiculous. It comes more from a religious perspective. So that's not really a centrist position. That's more of a liberal position. That's more of a democratic position. On the other side, I believe in capital punishment. I believe that if you commit a serious crime, especially because we have a significant population crisis and because it costs money to keep you alive, that you should not stay alive. I know some people might lose their shit on that, but it's just called being logical. It's called being thinking about this scientifically, thinking about it logically. We do not have the resources to support people who are a detriment to society. I'm not saying kill all the people in the prisons or kill all the people in the jails. No, because there are people who have committed petty crimes who probably shouldn't even be, that's more in jails, not really in prisons, but there are people who've committed petty crimes who probably shouldn't be in jail. In prisons, I mean, there are a lot of people who probably deserve to be there, and I know there are people who are wrongfully convicted, but here's the thing. If we know for a fact, if we have evidence, if you have been convicted of, say, serial murders, you've been convicted of multiple murders or multiple rapes or something like that, and you have, I know this is a small percentage, but just to start, if you have a life sentence or more, especially if you have multiple life sentences, you're going to be in jail for the rest of your life. And in my opinion, we should not continue to support someone who we know is just going to die in prison. I don't believe in that concept. I don't believe in, well, let them live. No, because the whole point of it is rehabilitation. That's the whole point of jail and prisons. I mean, it doesn't really work that way. The way that prisons and jails are structured, they're not really designed to rehabilitate. It's just kind of a money-making scheme. And that's not just my opinion. I know people who've been in jail, and I'm getting this information from them. I mean, based on what they've told me, it seems like it's just a scheme. They punish people for being good inmates. They reward people for being complete assholes. Supposedly they're getting all this money per inmate out of government spending, but they don't actually spend it. I mean, you'll see like 60 guys in a single room. One person will be dead on the floor, and because they pay like 3 people to look after them, 3 people that they probably pulled off the street. Now, I might be exaggerating a little bit here, but workers who don't really give a shit, who don't want to be there, and then they don't even realize until it's been 72 hours that this guy is dead on the floor. Now, that anecdote is actually that was a guy in his own cell. He was in his cell for like 72 hours, and nobody realized that he was dead. That kind of shit is ridiculous. I'm kind of getting off on a tangent. My point there was that prisons don't really work the way that they should. But getting back to the ideal, in an ideal world, prisons and jails are supposed to rehabilitate. That's what they're supposed to do. Well, if you're in there for your entire life, if you're in there for quote-unquote multiple life sentences, you're not going to be rehabilitated. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that, it's okay to kill people, but if you're a realistic person, if you truly are a logical, reasonable centrist, you have to acknowledge the fact that sometimes bad things need to happen. That doesn't mean that you like it. Sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do for the good of the larger population, for the human population, for the larger society. Sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do. Sometimes you have to do things that you don't like. I mean, that's just nature. People have to die. You have to understand that we have, depending upon numbers, somewhere between 7.4, 7.5 billion people on this planet. And we're set to gain another billion people within like 12, 13 years. The population is dramatically increasing. Now, the rate may be slightly going down, and people claim that that's somehow some sort of positive. Like, well, hey, the rate's going down. Yeah, but the number is still going up. The point is, we cannot afford to have people in society who are a detriment to society. And like I said, I'm not saying eliminate all people in jails and prisons. I'm saying I am in favor of capital punishment because, and only in very particular cases, because there are people who have committed such heinous crimes that they do not deserve to live. I'm not saying they should die painfully. I'm just saying kill them. Kill them as quickly, as painlessly as possible, because the moment you've done something that horrible, you have sacrificed your rights. You have sacrificed your rights as a citizen. You've sacrificed your human rights. Now, I'm not saying that means you don't treat them like a human. Like I said, kill them as quickly and as painlessly as possible. But we, the average people, who don't kill a bunch of people for no reason, who don't rape a bunch of people, who don't commit these heinous crimes, that's why we have our rights. We have earned our rights. These people have broken the rules that are painfully obvious rules. It's not like you didn't know. Especially if you've done it multiple times and been in and out of jail, in and out of prison. If you've earned a life sentence or more, and I know that's kind of an extreme example because there are probably other people who've committed heinous crimes who haven't earned a life sentence. But I'm just saying, I believe in capital punishment because there are people who have become a detriment to society, especially if they're going to be in jail their whole lives. That completely defeats the whole concept of rehabilitation because they're going to be there forever. I mean, as long as they don't get parole. But if you got multiple life sentences. And I know that was a long tangent just to get to the point that one of my positions is more liberal and one of my positions you would probably consider more conservative. But that doesn't mean that when I said the first one, I'm a liberal, and when I said the second one, I'm a conservative. That was kind of the sentiment that I got from watching Skeptic's video. That, well, if John, and now I don't know John Jafari. I don't know him personally. I don't really know what his political views are. Obviously, he's pretty much kept them hidden the whole time that he's been on the internet, at least if you're just watching his content. So I don't know what he really thinks. But the idea that if he starts talking about quote-unquote white culture, just because that sounds a bit more alt-right, that maybe he has, maybe as Skeptic puts it, he leans a bit more to the right than we know, I don't believe that. I don't believe that just because you have one perspective that may sound more conservative, that means that you lean more to the right than people may have previously realized. I just think you could still be a centrist. I'm not saying he is, but you can still be a centrist and lean to the right or lean to the left on different issues. The fact is that it balances out. It's not about standing perfectly in the middle and always making a compromise, because a compromise is not always the right answer. If you do not understand that, then you're really not a logical person, that a compromise is not always the right answer. Sometimes a more extreme answer is better. You can't, like, if somebody's launching nuclear weapons, somebody has to make a really quick decision to do something about it. You can't take up a vote and create a compromise, okay? I know that's an extreme example, but the point is, a compromise is not always the answer. Sometimes a more extreme answer is best. And being a centrist, in my opinion, being a centrist is about looking at the situation and coming up with the most logical solution to a problem. What makes the most sense? That, in my opinion at least, is what defines centrism. What makes the most sense? It's not about being perfectly in the middle between two extremes. It's about ignoring the lines. Basically, I mean, there's still a spectrum, but pretending that there is no spectrum and just saying, look, I'm not going to say that this view is necessarily more liberal or conservative, even if it is. I don't consider it that way. For me, it's just what makes more sense, and then somebody will tell me, hey, that happens to be more liberal, or hey, that happens to be more conservative, and I'll say, okay, whatever. I don't necessarily consider myself either. I may lean more to one side on some issues and lean more to the other side on other issues, but that does not mean that today I'm a liberal and tomorrow I'm a conservative. If it balances out, if my goal is to pick what makes the most sense, I consider that centrism. It may not be perfect centrism, but I in my opinion, somebody who sticks perfectly to the middle and never shifts to one side or the other, that is probably, it's more logical than being on the extremes, but it's still illogical. It doesn't make sense. You have to be flexible. You cannot be rigid in your position, because there are always going to be exceptions. There are always going to be things that you can't predict. There are going to be situations that don't fit the mold, and you have to be flexible. You have to be able to lean to one side or the other to take on certain ideas, certain values that will apply to that situation. You have to be able to spread your arms over the whole spectrum, not just stand in the middle with your arms at your side. So anyway, those are pretty much my thoughts. I just wanted to express how I view centrism. I don't view it as standing perfectly in the middle. I view it just as choosing the most logical solution to a problem. Like I said, I don't know how the whole conversation went between Jontron and Destiny, but just based on the video that Skeptic made, I really felt the need to make this point because I feel like it's kind of misframing the issue. Now, I admit, I probably hold some bias towards Jontron just because I really like his content, but I'm not trying to defend him so much as I am just pointing out the fact that centrism is not what Skeptic seems to be making it out to be. It's not this thin little sliver in the middle of the spectrum. I mean, maybe you should just call it something else, but when I consider myself a centrist, what that means to me is that I stand in the middle of two extremes, and like I said, I just choose whatever makes the most sense. I don't remain perfectly in the middle because that does not make the most sense. Having a rigid position really doesn't make any sense because there's so much in the universe that we don't understand. There's so much that we don't know. So you have to be flexible. You have to be open-minded. You have to be able to accept the fact that no matter where you stand, you're going to have to shift your position sometimes based on what makes sense. And even though other people might say, well, hey, you're not being consistent, you're changing what you said, it's like, no, I'm not. From the very beginning, my goal was to choose what made the most sense. I don't stand with one particular group. I stand wherever it makes the most sense at any one time. You view this as these boxes, one that says Democrat, one that says Republican, and then maybe one that says centrist, that's right in the middle. I don't see those boxes. I think outside the box. It works. Try it. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the whole Jontron versus Destiny and centrism thing. So, I'm Drachona, and I'll see you guys next time.
Evidence, motherfucker! Do you speak it?
I just had a real quick thought on the whole Jontron versus Destiny thing. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is a direct response to a video that Armoured Skeptic made. Hang on, I got to burp. Whew. Okay.